Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back here to another edition of Intuitive Angling, and thank you very much for checking today's video out. Much appreciated. And guys, today we're going to make a long overdue case about it's time for weigh-ins to stop. Bassmaster, MLF, regional circuits, local circuits, we've reached a point in the evolution of bass fishing where tournament weigh-ins are not serving the sport well. So I want to get into that, have a conversation about it. I know there's a lot of public interest in that, so I think it's going to be a good video to talk about. So guys, real quick, just to remind you, we got one more day left in the July sale on my Solar Bat Series RB2 sunglasses here. If you buy a pair this weekend, by the end of the month, you get them at 40% off. I'll put the Solar Bat link in the description, and you guys can get you a pair of these good Solar Bat glasses. Much appreciated there. Okay guys, here's the situation where I wanted to do this video. I did a video day before yesterday. I was, talking about how, people need to stop filleting out bass and eating bass simply because it's not 1975 anymore. And the perception and the whole paradigm that we've had on fishing, it has to change a little bit in light of the fishing pressure. It's like people always have had this assumption that, fish are here to eat and it's okay to eat fish and you can keep some fish. And we've changed a little bit though, because we have so much intense fishing pressure on the lake that even if you have a segment of the population that do this, it's going to have a negative impact on our fisheries. It already is. So anyway, when I did that video, it sort of spurred this conversation about people fired back at me, and they say, Randy, you don't know what you're talking about. There's fish, bass tournaments kill more fish than people that eat bass, by far. So fair point. I'm not disagreeing that bass tournaments don't kill fish, because I've talked about that before. The thing about that is bass tournaments don't directly kill more fish, simply because a bass has a lot better chance of surviving if you catch it and release it versus putting a fillet knife to it. There's no chance from that. So to the extent of that, how that works out percentage wise, I'm not really sure, but that is a good point, and it's a point that I share. And what I want to talk about here is that it's time to stop weigh-ins. Weigh-ins are fish kills, mainly due to delayed mortality. A lot of it, there is a lot of direct mortality, but there's a tremendous amount of delayed mortality that doesn't get reported. And guys, I can't tell you how many tournaments that I have fished. I'm not going to mention the organizations, but they're well-known organizations where they had tournaments like during the post-spawn and that type of stuff, and there would be coolers and coolers of dead big bass that didn't survive the weigh-in. And that's just the ones that didn't survive the weigh-in. I'm not talking about the ones that died from delayed mortality. Tremendous amount of dead fish with that. Now, here's the deal. MLF, I've been very critical of them in the past, basically because I didn't agree with the way they started the Bass Pro Tour. They just handpicked a bunch of guys that did not have the qualifications that a lot of the guys, excuse me, that did not get an invitation for. I really don't like the way they fractured the sport, because it sort of reminds me of the way that Live Golf has done to the PGA. I think that the fracturing of the sport that came on the tour level by MLF was not a good thing for the sport. So there's a lot of different stuff I don't agree with them, but I will say one thing about MLF, that they've done an exemplary, they've set an exemplary bar with this, and that is the Bass Pro Tour getting away from weigh-ins and getting rid of weigh-ins, where you weigh your fish on the water and release your fish back in the water. Guys, I can promise you right now, this has been a tremendous, you cannot over or underestimate what this has done as far as the bass survival just on the Bass Pro Tour. By catching a bass, weighing it, releasing it immediately, and not dragging it around in a live well all day long and hauling it up to a weigh-in, they're saving practically all the fish. I mean, the only fish that aren't surviving are the ones that are going to be mortally hooked or gut hooked or something like that. This is the way all tournaments need to be. We don't need to have weigh-ins anymore, guys, because what happens is based upon the time of the year that you're fishing. And like I said, I've talked about this on the videos before, you know, tournament organizations, they refuse to stop having tournaments on top of the spawn or during the post spawn when the fish are weakest and most vulnerable. So they insist on, you know, being irresponsible and putting tournaments at times where we don't need tournaments. And at the same time, when you catch fish during those situations, you put them in a live well. This is what's happens. You put these fish in a live well, and they're already stressed out from being caught. So they're not in a good position right off the bat when they get in the live well. And then they get in a live well, and you may have different water quality issues. You may have different oxygen levels in there. You may have some substandard live wells. You may have aeration problems. There's a host. You know, you may have an abundance of ammonia. There's a bunch of water quality issues that are detrimental to the bass right off the bat. And then what happens? Let's say you catch a bass at 8:30 in the morning, and you run around with it all day in your live well. Guys, do you know how many scales are knocked off a fish by getting hauled around in a live well? I don't care if it's even calm out. It's like if you've got a limit of fish in a live well and you're running down the lake for 7 or 8 hours during the day, if you hit a boat wake or something like that, those fish rub against each other and knock their scales off. And I'll tell you one situation that I am not proud about in my own situation is I was fishing a tournament at the Mississippi River, Bass FLW tournament, and I was leading this tournament going into the last day of the tournament, and I was making a 180-mile run one way. And I've talked about this before, guys. The second day of the tournament, when I was still leading the tournament, I had a close to 20-pound limit in my live well, and I had to run that whole distance down the Mississippi River, rough water. When I got back to the weigh-in, every fish in my live well, it looked like you took a scaler and just removed all the scales. They didn't have any scales on them. It literally looked like you took a fillet knife and just scaled both sides of the bass. I was sick about it. I mean, the bass were barely alive. It's like the limit that I weighed in there, they were still breathing, but they were struggling, and every one of those fish, I guarantee, died, guys. Every one of them. They counted them as alive because they were alive when I weighed them. They weren't going to survive, and I felt sick about it. And the thing about that is, if we would have had a catch on the spot and release like MLF, every one of those fish that I caught would have survived, and they'd have been perfect like that. So there's nothing stopping it. Number one is bass tournament weigh-ins. Aside from something like the Bassmaster Classic, there's no benefit to having a weigh-in, because basically, guys, I'm here to tell you the truth about weigh-ins. For the most part, the only people that show up to bass tournament weigh-ins are the friends of the anglers, families of the anglers, staff that's around there, and maybe a handful of local people out there, with the exception of something like the Bassmaster Classic, which is, it's geared, to be a show there at the weigh-in. But here's what we're having. It's like all of these tournaments, I don't care if it's a club tournament, a BFL tournament, a Toyota Series tournament, a Bassmaster Open, any type of buddy circuit like that, it's time to stop weigh-ins. And all you have to do, it's so simple to do, you just have to set up a situation where you have another angler in the boat, whether it be a co-angler or a marshal or an observer or something like that. Observers are actually the best thing to do. And have them, everybody has the same scale on the boat, and have this fish weighed on the spot, verified by the other angler in the boat, and released on the spot, just like they do on the Bass Pro Tour. That is the way to do it out there. And in an extreme situation where there's not another angler in the boat, all you have to do is have the angler have this weigh-in procedure verified on camera, whether it be with their cell phone or GoPro or whatever, where they show the scale, they show it zeroed, they show you putting it up there, they show there's nothing interfering with you messing with the fish to increase the weight on it. It can be done like that. And what would happen is our live release rate would skyrocket from where it is right now, because a lot of those guys out there that eat bass, they, I agree with them in the fact that the delayed mortality is off the chart. And Bassmaster, I'm not really sure why they don't do this, because they're the ones that need to set the standard. Ray Scott is the one that really came up with the whole conservation catch and release program back in the 70s. And I'm surprised they haven't instituted the, release on the spot like MLF has done. So it just gets back to the bigger picture here, guys. I mean, it's as far as sustainability for the future and conservation efforts. I was really shocked when I did that video a couple days ago. I did that video on how we don't need to be keeping and eating bass, and it made me realize how many people out there still keep and eat bass. Guys, I lost hundreds of subscribers on my channel the last couple days by coming out as a conservationist and encouraging catch and release. There were guys that were pissed about it, and it's like anything else. There's a segment of people out there that get super pissed if you tell them what they can and can't do, even if it's for the better good. They don't want to be told that. And at some point, I think the shift that has to take place is we have got to stop thinking about ourselves here and now, what's good for us, what our rights are, and we've got to focus on the future. It's not about us here and now. It's about what we're going to hand off to future generations. And a lot of these guys out there that are bass eaters, they're not looking at that. They're just looking at what they can get here and now for them and what their rights are. And they don't consider the fact if everybody had their mentality, there's not going to be anything for people down the road to catch. Bass are a finite resource in these lakes. Make no mistake about it, guys. There are fewer bass in our lakes than they've ever been before, but this illusion has been created that there's a lot of bass in our lakes because we become so good at catching them. All of the technology, rod and reel technology, improved boats, improved trolling motors, forward-facing sonar crap, all this stuff has made people, has made anglers so good at catching fish that there's no stone unturned, and it creates this illusion that there's more fish, and there's really not out there. So anyway, guys, just sort of a message to the tournament organization. It's the weigh-ins are sort of archaic and barbaric. It's time to get rid of them. I applaud MLF, Bass Pro Tour, for setting the bar with this. Everybody needs to follow it. It's a good idea. It's good for the fishery. There's other ways that the tournament could be promoted to make the tournament viable from that standpoint without having to weigh the fish in. So anyway, guys, let me know what your thoughts are and to shoot some comments, and we'll talk later. See you.